We frequently receive questions from clients who are looking to incorporate AI functionality into their product or develop AI products by leveraging third-party LLMs or APIs. Now, this is a really great way to accelerate development due to the massive amount of training data and time that's required to develop a base model. However, there are a number of considerations you should take into account when taking that approach, and I'm going to discuss 5 of those today. The first point to consider is to make sure that you're getting adequate rights from the provider. Now, the LLMs that are under standard open source licenses are going to be the most flexible, but a number of providers have commercial terms that restrict the use of their API or LLM. In that case, you'll want to make sure that your intended use falls within the realm of the permitted use cases. You should also check for any rate limits or the fees that are charged based on usage. Again, you'll want to make sure that when you're then passing this tool on to your customers, that you're not suddenly going to be hit with excessive fees or throttling excessive usage or something else that might disrupt the customer's experience or result in an imbalance between the benefit you're getting from using the tool and the cost that you're having to pay out for the usage. A third point to consider is making sure that the provider's commitments to you are consistent with the commitments that you want to make to your customers. This is particularly notable in the case of security commitments, as well as whether or not you train on your customers' data. And so you'll want to look at the commitments that the provider is making to you with respect to the security of any data passing through their tool, as well as whether or not they're going to retrain on any data that's passed back to them. Again, this tends to come up a little bit more with the APIs than the LLMs. A fourth point to consider is including disclaimers in your terms with respect to the service. Now, this is pretty common with respect to any time that you're using a third-party tool, but again, making sure that your customers know that you're not responsible for the third-party tool or its outputs, and that you don't have responsibility or liability for that. A fifth and related point is also in your terms, ensuring that you flow down to your customers any restrictions that you either receive from the provider or rights that you need to pass back to the provider. So for example, if you're sending data back to the third-party tool, you will want to get the rights from your customer to do so. Similarly, a number of these providers are going to have acceptable use policies or other terms that restrict things like behavior which is illegal, explicit, offensive, or otherwise harmful, though they tend to go into a lot more detail than that. You'll need to pass those same restrictions on to your customers to make sure that you're not in breach with your obligations to the providers. A sixth and final bonus point that I will mention as well is you may also want to consider any external data sources and the rights that apply to those. Now, up until this point, I've mostly imagined somewhat of a closed universe where the only additional data flowing into your product is the data that you're receiving directly from your own customers. However, if you make the decision to either pre-train or fine-tune your model that you're now leveraging, you may be licensing external data sources or scraping data from other sources. In that case, there are a number of other issues that are going to come up with respect to that data and that content. So for example, potential copyright infringement, fair use, and potential breach of contract with respect to data that you may be scraping from a website. Those are issues that are very actively being litigated right now, and I therefore like to refer you to the presentations of some of my litigator colleagues. But those are all things that you'll want to take into account, particularly if that is part of what you're doing with your product.